Happy Nutrition and Hydration Week. This week, we are going to be covering off the basics in how to eat well and drink well to ensure good health. And we're going to just be covering these basics because I think that it's very easy to get tangled into various different diets for specific health needs and health goals and forget to get the basics right. And I think getting the basics is a really important building block for better health. So today's Insta Live, I'm talking to registered dietitian Catherine Rabess about getting these building blocks exactly right. I'm just going to also known as CAF dietitian and has a lot of experience within gastroenterology and enteral support. Hello, Catherine.
Hi. Hi,
Hi.
Sasha. How are you?
Yeah, good, good, good.
Good.
It's a wonderfully sunny day. Can't
So
complain. Really
gorgeous.
feels like spring is here.
It's so gorgeous. Like not having to use any false lighting is so nice. Just window, there's natural sun. It's so good.
Oh, long may it last. So I've given a very, very brief introduction to you and your experience, but it would be really great if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself, the areas
Sure.
that you specialize in, and maybe why you became a dietitian.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thanks so much for having me on. For those that don't know, my name's Catherine, also known as CAF Dietitian. I'm a registered dietitian specialising in gut health and complex nutrition support. I've been qualified now for about 12 years, and in that time, I've specialised in the area of gastroenterology, so focusing a lot on functional gut symptoms, gut dysmotility, also looking at things like inflammatory bowel disease as well. So I support clients with that. I work in the NHS 4 days a week, and then I also do a bit of private freelance work and do one-to-one clinics as well. Um, so I guess my journey started many, many years back when my dad, he actually had diabetes, and there was a lot of conversations in our household about what he can't have. And I was quite young, and that exposure there really led to me wanting to learn more about nutrition and diet and healthy eating and how much of a positive impact it can have on people's lives and conditions too. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that is exactly why I became a dietitian too. I think there's this real power in food. We say food is medicine, but not to replace medicine in any way, but as a good adjunct. And that food, if used in the right ways, can really help you around certain conditions. But
Absolutely.
as I started the intro on this subject, I think, sometimes we just forget the simple basics. And I think the basics are so not sexy that no one wants to
I
really
want to
talk
hear
about
it.
them and focus on them. They're never in the media headlines. And, and then people get really confused about what are the right basics. And I think if you don't kind of get your head around the basics, which are these building blocks, upon
Absolutely.
which to sort of then add and tweak and amend to meet different conditions. So I think this is going to be a fantastic Insta Live. If
Yeah.
we can kind of cover this, then I feel like this is a great addition to all the other Insta Lives that I've probably done on other conditions.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so nice to hear you say that it's like the basics, the building blocks, and that's what Nutrition and Hydration Week is about, isn't it? It's really trying to give people, raise awareness and exposure to the importance of food and drink and healthy eating and how much of an important role it plays.
So it's National Nutrition and Hydration Week.
Mm.
Um, what is this week all about?
Well, I've actually pulled this right from the website because if I'm honest, I think it encompasses so much when we're
Yeah.
thinking about nutrition and hydration. But the key thing here is about getting people together in this week, but also throughout the rest of the year to really understand and gain exposure about the importance of eating well, food, drink, how important that is within our own lives, but also within settings such as health and social care as well, where there's a lot happening at the moment. You could even see on Twitter and so many different hospitals, care homes, all working together to really try and raise awareness about the importance of food and drink and nutrition.
Yeah, and why does it matter? Why does it matter? I guess this is probably a silly question,
I
but I think
mean,
it's sort of worth
yeah.
starting with. Like, why should we care about our nutrition and hydration in the first place? And what happens if we don't get it right?
Yeah, well, there's the risk of undernutrition, so malnutrition, of
Mm,
actually being poor nutritional intake, which can lead to significant weight loss and the associated risks with malnutrition, those complications, which I've spoken about quite a bit on my own page. But, thinking about also overnutrition. So, if we're having too much to eat, excessive amounts of intake, how that could present in terms of us too. But making people aware that, having good, healthy nutrition, you don't have to be on a crazy diet. You don't have to, nowadays there's so much stuff online about following this restrictive diet, all these crazy sort of fad diets out there, which are not necessary at all. Just the basics, like you said, Sasha, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but really focusing on that is important.
yeah. Well, I think let's dive straight in. Let's talk about
Yeah.
what does good nutrition look like for all of us? I mean, I know we speak a lot about personalization, but I guess there must be some sort of basic principles that we could apply to our diet. What does a good basic diet look like?
Yeah. So if we're thinking about like British Nutrition Society, their guidelines on the Eat Well plate, we are focusing on actually having a balanced diet throughout the day. We're not just thinking about that one plate specifically. So the Eat Well guide is what we really should be calling it. So focusing on having more whole grains within our diet. So pulling away from, trying to have more carbohydrates, which are brown rice, brown pasta, different types of grains, rice, for example, millet, trying to have a bit more variety as they're higher in fiber too, but also thinking about increasing our plant-based protein and trying to reduce our red meat consumption. So focusing on things like beans and pulses, tofu, having more of a variety from different sources of protein. But if we do eat red meat, that's absolutely fine as well, but trying to go for more leaner meat options. So whether it be, lower fat mince, or looking at potentially having chicken, poultry, even fish as well. More oily fish is really important, particularly with the links with our heart health and the omega-3s in there. But also thinking about, our dairy products, because it's so important we're getting good sources of dairy and milk because of calcium, and whether that be cow's milk, goat's milk, sheep's milk, plant-based, soya, whatever that may be. It's just really important that it's fortified with calcium, contains calcium, because that's the building blocks for our bones as well. And just trying to think about reducing our overall consumption of high fat, high sugar foods and drinks and snacks, because as we know, a lot of these foods are ultra processed. So when I say high fat, high sugar foods, I'm thinking about cakes, biscuits, donuts, all the good stuff basically. And trying to really limit those high sugar foods and high fat foods as well.
So where can people go if they want to find out a little bit more about it? Because there's some fantastic graphics, I think visuals that people can see, and a little bit more sort of where it outlines numbers of portion sizes, because it's not just what, but it's how these different food groups work together. Where would you signpost
Yeah.
people to find the right, reliable information on this stuff?
Yeah, so the British Nutrition Foundation have got a fantastic section on Eat Well Guide, but also about portion sizes and really explaining what a portion is. It's got a really in-depth part about having 5 a day. I think I forgot to even mention that, increasing our fruit and veg intake. So 5 portions, a minimum of fruit and veg every day. So, that's a really good source. The British Dietetic Association, the BDA, they've also got really good leaflets, which are available to download on healthy eating, which might be really useful for people. You could even just search on Google Eat Well Guide as well, and it would take you to the Department of Health, which will give you some more information about that.
Perfect. I think actually when we get this live saved, it'd be wonderful if you could add that link to the nutrition, British Nutrition Foundation link, so we can add that in, and we'll add the BDA one into comments, because I think then people can easily find it. And obviously, we've covered a bit about what you eat, but it's not always just what you eat, it's how you eat. And do you have any tips on healthy eating habits?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I spend a lot of time with my clients, not just focus on overall diet, but also what their eating patterns look like, because as a gut health specialist, that plays a huge part with certain conditions such as IBS, for example. But in general, I think it's try and reduce the amount of distractions when you're eating. Try and we call it mindful eating. So when you're sat down eating, try and avoid having the TV on or like mindless scrolling on your phone. Really try to spend time to focus on what you're eating, enjoying your food as well. And another thing to think about is just your regular eating patterns. When you can, try and limit eating on the go and rushing to eat food, because again, that doesn't help with digestion too. So I think those things are really important.
Perfect. And I guess there's this relationship with also portion sizes. How do you know what is the right portion size? I guess one has a bit of a guidance, but when you say five a day, even that's quite difficult. What's a portion of fruit or vegetable?
It's a good question. It does vary depending on the size of the fruit. Of course, like one portion of a whole pineapple is not a portion. It's probably about 10. But we're thinking about the actual size. If you're thinking about vegetables, for example, it's about 80 grams, which would be about 2 handful size, would roughly be for vegetables. In terms of fruit, it can vary depending on the fruit. So one banana or one medium-sized apple would probably be one portion. But then if you're thinking about smaller fruit, things like saxumas or plums, that's usually 2 servings of those would be one portion. And then if you're thinking about, grapes or blueberries or cherries, again, that's usually like a small handful, and that would be about a portion size.
Perfect. And beans and pulses, they obviously fit into the fruit and veg category, and really important. I guess they provide protein and vitamins and minerals. Potatoes, they're classed as a carb. I guess always worth to sort of point that out. I have met some people who go, well, is it a vegetable or not? So it falls in that. Any sort of unusual things to sort of point out about the Eat Well plate that you should think about?
I guess the key thing is to focus not so much on just each individual section, but how you can have that across your day. Sometimes people get quite transfixed on the fact that their plate needs to look like this Eat Well guide just because it's a circle with sort of fractions. That's not what it's trying to imply. What it's trying to imply is what your diet should look like throughout the whole day. So try and focus on breaking the day down based on what a meal, meals are to you. I know not everybody has 3 square meals a day. Like myself, I'm a grazer. I have 3 meals, but then I have multiple snacks throughout the day as well. So sometimes it just depends on what eating looks like for you, but try and incorporate that Eat Well guide throughout those meals that you are having is key.
Oh, that's a really, really great tip. So let's unpack hydration a little bit. How much should you drink every day?
So I think the guidelines are for women, it's 1,600 milliliters, which actually doesn't seem like that much. And for men it's 2,000 milliliters, but I think it is very dependent on the person. And I know, Sasha, you say it, I say it all the time, like one size does not fit all. It really does depend, on your own circumstances, whether you've been doing a lot of exercise that day, potentially you've been quite poorly, and you do need to pick up your hydration, or medication that you're on that might actually change how much fluid you need. So I guess that's a bit of a fairy answer, but really trying to have at least 6 to 8 cups of fluid every day is what I would recommend.
And I find having just a big bottle of water on my desk is really helpful, because it's also a prompted drink, because I think one just sort of forgets. And another interesting fact that I was amazed when I learned is by the time you're actually thirsty,
you're
you're
already
actually quite
dehydrated.
far down the dehydration journey. So
Yeah.
that, that reaction or this thirst reflex, you're actually becoming slightly dehydrated before the thirst reflex even kicks in. So it's really good to sort of
Yeah.
stay on top of it. Is that right? Have I got that fact
Yeah, such a
correct?
good point. And something else which a lot of people aren't aware of, the brain mechanism that associates thirst with hunger is very similar. So often you may find that you've had something to eat and you're still hungry, but actually it could be that you're thirsty and you probably haven't drunk enough water or fluid in that after that meal or before that meal. So really important to think about, have I drunk enough? Because sometimes that can mask whether you're actually, thirsty or actual hunger. So that's also key.
And does it matter when we drink?
Oh, I don't think so.
I
I
just
don't
sort
know.
of wondering in terms of, should, have it with a meal, before a meal, after a meal. We've spoken about definitely having it throughout the day, perhaps when you wake up in the morning. I'm starting to get at
Yeah.
that age where if I have too late in the evening, that can disrupt sleep. So,
And I'm also pregnant, so I totally get that. Yeah, so earlier on in the day as possible. It's a really good question. I guess in relation to like gut health specifically, if you suffer with bloating quite a bit and you have problems with that, it's worth drinking after your meal, I would say. Also, if you have quite a small appetite as well and you struggle with meals, definitely trying to have a drink after you finished your meal would probably be ideal as well.
and
Yeah.
what drinks, in the 6 to 8 glasses a day, what drinks
Mm.
would you advise? We've said drinks. Obviously, I'm talking non-alcoholic drinks, but I'll let you explain that.
Yeah, well, water is the cheapest drink out there, of course. It's free, which we're quite fortunate in the UK, of course. But I think we should be trying to stay away from like the sugary drinks and those drinks, those energy drinks, which are really high in caffeine as well. So going for the unsweetened drinks, but coffee, milk, water, juice, all of these constitute as fluid and drinks, and would go towards your fluid consumption, but really trying to have more water in where possible if you can. I would also say a really good tip is, if you haven't already, do keep an eye on things like indicators that you might be a bit dehydrated. So the color of your urine, also thinking if your mouth's quite dry, if you've got a bit of a headache, these can all be signs as well that you're not drinking enough, and it's important to then drink a bit more.
What about sugar-free beverages?
Yeah, so there's always this sort of thought that sugar-free, artificial sweeteners are not good for you, they're bad for you. But actually, they're fine. There's no reason why you can't have sugar-free drinks. I think where the research has become quite cloudy is that people have mistaken some research which has shown very excessive amounts of artificial sweeteners in the diet have been linked to things such as cancer. However, we're talking about 15 to 20 unsweetened artificial sweetener drinks. So, having the occasional one or two unsweetened drinks, or if it's in squash, for example, is absolutely fine.
And I guess to point out on fruit juice, that fruit juice obviously can still be quite high in sugar, which is why there's a limiting factor set on fruit juice, that 1 glass of fruit juice can count to your 5 a day, but actually as only one portion. I don't know if you sort of want to expand on why that is.
Yeah, and a glass size, we're not talking like a tumbler, we mean literally like 150 mils is
Mm.
about the size that you should be having. And that's because, so although they are natural sugars, if you're going for, natural fruit juice, they still have large amounts of fruit added to that to make that drink. So because of that, it then increases the natural sugar intake, and that then contributes to sugar, which of course we want to try and avoid having too much of. So that's why they suggest 150 mils as a portion.
Yeah, and portions seem to be getting supersized all over the place. So it's really worth just using a measuring jug and having a look at 150 looks like. It's not a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And smoothies, they can count for slightly more. Can they count for up to two, or do they still count as one portion?
They can count up to two, but again, smoothies have multiple different fruits added to them, and they often tend to be even higher in sugar than things like Coca-Cola. You'd be surprised. So, you know, although it looks like a smoothie might be healthy and beneficial for you, a good way of getting your fruit intake, I would say going for like an actual portion of fruit would be a better option, really.
And what's your view on carbonated drinks, just fizzy water, for example? Any evidence about whether those are good or bad?
Um, I don't know off the top of my head if there's anything whether them being good or bad. I think if it again, if you could try and stick with, you know, uncarbonated drinks, that would be a better option. But I wouldn't say that it's a good or a bad thing, to be honest.
Good. I think it's actually really well worth using those descriptors and being quite careful when we refer to food, because I think everything can have its place as part of moderation, as part of a balanced diet. Obviously, I guess fizzy drinks or carbonated drinks might add a little bit more gas to the system. If you're a particularly sensitive tummy, that might be something that you need to watch out for, because you don't want to necessarily introduce more gas to the system. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So we've covered so much ground. I wonder if you could give us your 3 top tips for eating and drinking better.
First one, which I actually need to follow my own myself, is just drinking more, for sure. Sometimes I think I'm only on my second glass today. So definitely drinking more water if you can. If you're not a fan of water, you know, we've spoken about these sort of sugar-free squashes are a really good way of, or even flavored with fresh fruit. It's a good way of getting more water down. I think my second thing, as a gut health specialist, I'm always banging on about fiber. So really trying where possible to increase your fiber intake, whether that be from whole grains, you know, more fruits and veg. How about even just trying to add, you know, a tablespoon of nuts or seeds to your breakfast or lunch is a really good way to get more fiber in your diet. And I think the third thing for me would probably be trying to pull away from classing food as good or bad, because once we get down that sort of rabbit hole of certain foods being good for you, certain foods being bad for you, we then start to really pulling away from the enjoyment and the importance of food and drink within our day to day. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Great tips. And we've got a comment here that removing squash has made a huge difference for me. Yeah, because
Hi, Sarah.
squash can be really high in sugar.
It can. But even the sugar-free squash, it contains a type of sugar alcohol, which can sometimes cause a lot of bloating, a lot of gas. But if you don't suffer with IBS or have any sort of gut-related symptoms, then, you know, a sugar-free squash is usually okay. But sometimes it can be quite triggering for gut symptoms as well.
And I guess one thing to take away is lots of people find water boring, but you can jazz up your water by putting a little bit of mint in it, or, you know, a little bit of lemon or a few berries to sort of add a little bit of flavor to it. And then you get all the hydration without really much of the sugar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Catherine. I've really enjoyed Insta Live. It was really fantastic chatting to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me on, Sasha.
Oh, and thanks everyone for joining us. We'll save it and we'll add your comments. Make sure we could put those links at the bottom of this in comments, and enjoy the rest of this wonderful spring day.
You too. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.